The bullet grazed Yates Ashford's shoulder as he dove behind the water trough, his heart hammering not from fear but from pure fury at the waste of it all, because somebody had just shot clean through his last remaining rose bush, and now pink petals were scattered across the dirt like drops of blood. He fired back twice, watching the rustlers scatter toward the hills beyond his property line, their horses kicking up dust that hung in the Montana afternoon like a dirty curtain. When the shooting stopped and silence settled over his ranch outside Hecla, Yates stood slowly, pressing his hand against the shallow wound, but his eyes were fixed on the destroyed garden that had once been his mother's pride. That was how he found himself 3 days later standing outside the mercantile in town, reading a handwritten notice tacked to the post about a woman newly arrived from Ohio who had experience with plants and was looking for work. Clara Meadows, the notice read, with an address at the boarding house on 3rd Street. Yates had never hired a woman before, had never hired anyone really, preferring to handle his small ranch alone since his mother passed 2 years prior. But the garden, that garden his mother had planted with her own hands, that she had tended through Montana's short growing seasons and harsh winters, that garden deserved better than his clumsy attempts at resurrection. He found her sitting on the boarding house porch, and his first thought was that she looked tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. Clara Meadows had dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, green eyes that assessed him with surprising directness, and hands that bore the calluses of someone who knew real work. She wore a simple brown dress that had been mended in several places, and there was a carpet bag at her feet that looked like it held everything she owned. "Miss Meadows." Yates removed his hat, suddenly aware that he had not thought through what exactly he would say. "I am Yates Ashford. I saw your notice about gardening work." She stood, and he noticed she was tall for a woman, probably 5 feet 7 inches to his 6 feet 2. "Mr. Ashford, please sit down. Would you like some water? It is terribly hot today." Her voice carried the flat vowels of the Midwest, and there was something careful about the way she moved, as if she was conserving energy or perhaps protecting herself from disappointment. Yates sat on the porch step while she poured water from a pitcher into a tin cup and handed it to him. "I have a ranch about 4 miles outside town," he began, then found himself telling her more than he intended. About his mother's garden, about the roses and the herb beds and the vegetable patches that had somehow made Montana feel less wild and more like home. About the rustlers and his own failure to keep anything alive for more than a few weeks. She listened without interrupting, her eyes on his face, and when he finished she was quiet for a long moment. "I can help you," she finally said. "But I should be honest, Mr. Ashford. I need this work badly. I came to Montana because I was told there were opportunities here, but it seems most people are not eager to hire a woman without references or family connections. If you are offering me this position, I will work harder than any man you could hire, but I need to know the terms." Her directness surprised him into honesty of his own. Room and board in the house, separate quarters of course, and $20 a month. The work would be full-time, 6 days a week. Sundays you would have to yourself. "I cannot offer much, Miss Meadows, but I can promise you fair treatment and a safe place to live." Something flickered across her face, relief maybe, or something more complicated. "When would you like me to start?" "Today, if you are able. I can take you out to the ranch now, let you see what you would be working with, and you can tell me if it is even possible to save any of it." She glanced at the carpet bag. "Everything I own is right here. Let me inform Mrs. Patterson that I am leaving and I will be ready." 20 minutes later, they were riding out of Hecla in his wagon, Clara sitting straight-backed beside him while the afternoon sun beat down on the dirt road. Montana stretched around them in vast, rolling hills, the mountains visible in the distance, and Yates found himself acutely aware of her presence next to him. She did not chatter or try to fill the silence with meaningless conversation, which he appreciated. But occasionally she would point to a plant growing wild along the roadside and name it, her voice carrying a note of recognition that spoke of genuine knowledge. "Arnica," she said, indicating a cluster of yellow flowers. "Good for bruises and sprains, though you have to be careful with it. And there, that is yarrow. My grandmother used to say it could stop bleeding better than anything except a cautery iron." "You learned about plants from your grandmother." She was the closest thing to a doctor our town had. People would come from miles around when someone was sick or injured. She taught me everything she knew before she died. Clara paused, then added quietly, "She was the one who raised me, really." "My parents died of cholera when I was 6. Yates glanced at her. "I am sorry, that must have been hard. It was a long time ago, but yes, it was hard." She turned to look at him, and he felt the weight of her gaze. "Your mother, when did she pass?" 2 years this October." "Pneumonia took her fast. 1 week she was fine, the next she was gone." He heard the roughness in his own voice and cleared his throat. "The garden was hers. She used to say that growing things was the only way she could make Montana feel like Kentucky, where she came from." Clara nodded slowly. "Then we will do our best to bring it back. Not for us, but for her memory." The ranch came into view over the next rise, a modest spread with a main house built from logs, a barn that needed repairs, a chicken coop, and several outbuildings. The garden, or what remained of it, stretched behind the house in a plot roughly 40 feet by 60 feet, marked off by a fence that was mostly intact. As they drew closer, Yates saw it through Clara's eyes and felt embarrassment wash over him. What had once been organized beds were now choked with weeds. The soil looked depleted and hard, and the plants that remained were struggling weakly against neglect. Clara climbed down from the wagon before he could help her and walked directly to the garden fence. She stood there for a long moment, her hands resting on the weathered wood, and Yates came to stand beside her, watching her face as she surveyed the damage. "The soil needs serious work," she said finally. "It has been depleted and compacted. We will need compost, manure, anything organic we can work into it. The weeds need to be cleared, but some of them we should keep because they are telling us what the soil needs. That chicory there means the ground is compacted, the dandelions mean it is low in calcium. The good news is that the fence structure is solid. The layout is intelligent, and look there, those rose bushes, they are not dead. See those green stems at the base? We can prune them back and they will come back, maybe not this year, but next year for certain." Yates felt something loosen in his chest. "You really think it can be saved?" She turned to him, and for the first time he saw her smile, small and cautious but genuine. "Mr. Ashford, gardens are resilient. They want to grow. They want to thrive. All we have to do is give them the right conditions and be patient. Yes, this can be saved. It will take work and time, but it can absolutely be saved." He showed her the house next, feeling self-conscious about its rough bachelor state. The main room served as kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace that his father had built before dying in a ranching accident when Yates was 15. There were 2 bedrooms off the main room, and Yates had already prepared the smaller one for Clara, changing the sheets on the narrow bed and clearing out the boxes of his mother's things that he had been unable to face sorting through. "This was my mother's sewing room," he explained, standing in the doorway while Clara looked around at the simple space. A bed, a dresser, a small table with a chair, a window that looked out toward the mountains. "The lock works on the door and you can keep the key. I want you to feel safe here." Clara set her carpetbag on the bed and turned to face him. Thank you, Mr. Ashford. This is more than adequate. May I ask, what time would you like me to begin work in the mornings? Dawn is when I usually start, but the garden work can begin whenever makes sense to you. And please call me Yates. Mr. Ashford was my father. Then you should call me Clara. She folded her hands in front of her, and he noticed again how direct her gaze was. Should I prepare meals as well, or will we handle our own cooking? Yates had not thought this through. I do not want to assume you will cook for me. That was not part of our agreement. But it would be practical, would it not? We both need to eat, and it is more efficient to cook for two than separately. She paused. Unless you prefer to handle your own meals. If you are willing, I would appreciate it. And I will pay you an extra $5 a month for the cooking. She nodded. That is fair. Then I will start by seeing what supplies you have and planning supper for tonight. Tomorrow at dawn I will begin assessing exactly what the garden needs. That first evening, Yates sat at his own table, eating a meal he had not prepared, listening to the sounds of Clara moving around in her room, and felt the strangeness of having another person in the house after 2 years of solitude. The food was simple but good, better than anything he had made for himself in recent memory, and when Clara emerged for supper, they ate together in a silence that was not quite comfortable but not hostile either. "You have been running this ranch alone?" she asked, breaking the quiet. "Mostly. I hire help during roundup and branding, but day to day it is just me. I keep about 200 head of cattle, a dozen horses. It is not a big operation." "That is a lot of work for one person," he shrugged. "It is what I know. My father built this place from nothing, and my mother made it a home. Seemed wrong to let it go after they were both gone." Clara was quiet for a moment. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. "I understand that, wanting to honor what they built. It is a good reason to work hard." They finished eating, and Clara insisted on cleaning up despite his protest that she had already done enough for one day. Yates went out to check on the horses and secure the barn for the night, and when he came back inside, he could see the light under Clara's door. He lay in his own bed that night listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another person in the house, the soft footsteps, the creak of bed springs, and realized that he had been lonelier than he wanted to admit. Clara was awake before dawn, and Yates found her already outside when he emerged from the house, standing in the garden with a notebook in her hands, writing by the early morning light. She had changed into an older dress and wore a wide-brimmed hat against the sun that was just beginning to peek over the hills. "Good morning," she called when she saw him. "I am making a list of everything we need. It is quite extensive, I am afraid." He walked over to join her, and she showed him the notebook pages filled with her neat handwriting. Seeds for late summer planting, tools including a broadfork and several hand trowels, manure from the barn to be aged and composted, wood ash from the fireplace, lime for the soil, stakes and twine, and on and on. "We can start with what we have here on the ranch," she said. "The manure from your animals will be invaluable once it has properly aged. I noticed you have chickens, so we can use their droppings mixed with the bedding straw. In town, we will need to purchase seeds and possibly some of the tools, though I can improvise if necessary." "Make a list of what you need from town and I will get it," Yates said. "Money is not unlimited, but the garden is worth the investment." She looked up at him, shading her eyes against the rising sun. "You really loved your mother very much." It was not a question, but he answered anyway. "She was a good woman, strong. When my father died, she could have given up, could have moved back to Kentucky where her family was, but she stayed. Said this land had taken too much from us to abandon it now. She ran this ranch for 3 years before I was old enough to take over, and she never complained once." Clara nodded slowly. "She sounds remarkable. I hope I can do justice to her garden." Over the following days, Yates watched Clara transform from a woman he had hired into a force of nature. She worked from dawn until dusk, her hands constantly moving, her mind clearly running through calculations and plans that she would occasionally share with him. She started with clearing the weeds, but not indiscriminately. She explained which ones she was keeping and why, how they would help heal the soil or attract beneficial insects. She showed him how to build a compost pile, layering green plant matter with brown dried material and the aged manure, keeping it moist and turning it regularly. "This is black gold," she said, holding up a handful of the dark, crumbly compost. "This will transform that tired soil into something that can support life again." They worked side by side more often than not. Yates found himself drawn to the garden during times when he would normally be mending fence or checking on cattle. He told himself he was just curious about what she was doing, but the truth was he enjoyed her company. Clara did not fill silence with meaningless chatter, but when she spoke, it was usually something interesting or insightful, and she had a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard. "These chickens of yours are suspicious of me," she said one afternoon while collecting eggs. "Especially that red hen with the attitude." Yates grinned. "That is Henrietta. She is suspicious of everyone, including me. She once chased off a fox single-handedly. I believe it. She looks like she could take down a bear if properly motivated." He found himself laughing, a sound that felt rusty from disuse, and Clara smiled at him with an expression that made his chest feel tight. 2 weeks after Clara arrived, Yates made the trip into Hecla for supplies, taking her detailed list to the general store. The proprietor, an older man named Jeremiah whom Yates had known his entire life, raised his eyebrows as he read through the seed orders and tool requests. "Heard you hired that woman from Ohio," Jeremiah said, his tone carefully neutral. "This for her garden work." "It is for my mother's garden," Yates corrected him, hearing the edge in his own voice. "Miss Meadows is helping me restore it. Just seems odd, you living out there with an unmarried woman. People talk, Yates. You know how it is." Yates looked at the older man steadily. "Then people need to find something more interesting to talk about. Miss Meadows is my employee, and she lives in her own room with a lock on the door. There is nothing improper about the arrangement." Jeremiah held up his hands. "I am not saying anything, just telling you what I have heard. You know I liked your mother. God rest her soul. If this is about fixing up her garden, then I think it is a fine thing." As Jeremiah gathered the supplies, several other townspeople came into the store, and Yates felt their curious glances, heard the whispers that were not quite soft enough. He paid for the supplies and loaded them into the wagon with more force than necessary, angry at the small-mindedness of people who had nothing better to do than speculate about his life. When he returned to the ranch, Clara was working on building a trellis for pole beans, her face focused in concentration as she tied twine between stakes. She looked up when she heard the wagon, and her expression brightened in a way that made his earlier anger fade. "Did you get everything?" she called, wiping her hands on her apron as she walked over. "Everything on your list, and then some." Jeremiah at the store suggested a few varieties that do particularly well in Montana. He began unloading the supplies, and Clara joined him, examining each packet of seeds with the care some people reserved for precious gems. "Oh, this is wonderful. And look, he included some marigold seeds. Those will help keep pests away from the vegetables." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with enthusiasm, and Yates realized with sudden clarity that he had not hired Clara just to fix the garden. He had hired her because the house had been too empty, because he had been too alone, because something in him had recognized something in her. The thought should have alarmed him, but instead it settled over him like a comfortable weight. They worked together unloading and organizing the supplies, and Clara chattered about her plans for the garden, where each variety would go, how she would stagger plantings to extend the harvest. Yates found himself watching her more than listening, noticing the way she pushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the way her whole face changed when she smiled, the competent sureness of her movements. "Yates," she was looking at him with a question in her eyes. "Did you hear what I said?" "Sorry, I was distracted. What did you say?" "I asked if you had a preference about the herb garden. Your mother had started one over there by that south-facing wall, and I think we could expand it significantly. Herbs are useful for cooking and medicine, and they are relatively easy to maintain. Whatever you think is best, you are the expert." She tilted her head, studying him. "Are you all right? You seem troubled." "Just tired," he lied. "It was hot in town today." But that night after supper, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains, Clara brought it up again. "Did something happen in town? You have been quiet since you returned." Yates considered lying, but found he did not want to. "Some of the townspeople have been talking about you living here, making it into something improper." Clara was silent for a long moment, her hands folded in her lap. "I see. Would you like me to leave?" "What? No, of course not." He turned to face her. "I do not care what they think. I just wanted you to know in case any of it got back to you. I do not want you to feel uncomfortable or like your reputation is being damaged." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "My reputation was damaged long before I came to Montana, Yates. Why do you think I left Ohio?" He waited, sensing she would continue if he did not push. "I was engaged," she said finally, "to a man named Thomas. We had known each other since childhood, and everyone assumed we would marry. But 3 months before the wedding, I discovered he was already married. Had a wife and 2 children in Cincinnati that he visited once a month under the pretense of business trips. When I confronted him, he tried to convince me it did not matter, that his feelings for me were real regardless. I broke off the engagement, of course, but somehow the story got twisted in the telling. Suddenly, I was the other woman, the one who had tried to seduce a married man. His wife believed him over me, his family believed him, and my own town turned against me." She looked out at the darkening sky. "So I left, packed everything I could carry and bought a train ticket as far west as my money would take me, which happened to be Montana." Yates felt anger rise in him on her behalf. "That is not right. He should have been the one run out of town." "Should have been, but that is not how these things work. Women bear the consequences while men walk away unscathed." She turned to look at him. "So you see, my reputation is already ruined. If the people of Hecla want to gossip about me, they will regardless of what I do. I have learned to stop caring." "Well, I care," Yates said firmly, "and for what it is worth, I am glad you came to Montana. The garden is already looking better, and I—" He stopped, uncertain how to finish that sentence. Clara reached over and briefly touched his hand where it rested on the porch railing. "Thank you. That means more than you know." They sat together as full darkness fell, and Yates thought about loneliness and second chances, and how sometimes the things you thought you hired someone for turned out to be the least important things they gave you. As summer deepened, the garden began its transformation. Under Clara's patient care, the soil darkened and softened, the compost worked in until it disappeared into the earth. She planted seeds in careful rows, marking each one with wooden stakes and her neat handwriting on strips of wood. She transplanted volunteers from wild plants she found around the ranch, explaining how they would provide food and medicine. The rose bushes were cut back severely, looking almost dead, but Clara assured him they were gathering strength for next year's growth. Yates found his own work schedule beginning to revolve around the garden. He would check the cattle in the early morning, then return to help Clara with whatever heavy work needed doing, hauling water or moving soil or building structures for climbing plants. They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side, and he found himself telling her things he had never told anyone. About his father's death, about the years of struggling to keep the ranch afloat, about his mother's declining health and his helplessness in the face of it. Clara listened without judgment, and sometimes she shared her own stories. About her grandmother's healing work, about the plants and remedies she had learned, about the strange satisfaction of helping something grow. She told him about her parents, whose faces she could barely remember, and her grandmother who had filled that void with tough love and endless patience. She used to say that gardening was just controlled chaos. Clara said one afternoon, while they were weeding between the emerging seedlings, that you could plan and work and do everything right, but ultimately you were partnering with forces beyond your control. Whether insects, disease, pure chance. The trick was to do your part and then let go of what you could not control. Sounds like ranching, Yates replied, or life in general. She smiled at him, her hands dark with soil. Exactly like life in general. One evening in late July, after a particularly long day of work, Clara appeared from her room wearing a different dress, one that Yates had not seen before. It was simple but newer than her work clothes, a dark blue that brought out the green in her eyes, and she had left her hair down instead of pulling it back in its usual practical bun. She seemed almost shy as she joined him on the porch where he was sitting with a cup of coffee. "I thought maybe we could take an evening off," she said. "From work, I mean. Just sit and enjoy what we have accomplished." Yates looked out at the garden, which had indeed been transformed in just 6 weeks. Where there had been chaos and death, there was now order and life. Neat rows of vegetables showed bright green against dark soil. Herbs flourished along the south wall, and even though the roses would not bloom until next year, their trimmed stems showed new growth at the base. "It looks amazing," he said honestly. "You have worked miracles, Clara." She sat down beside him, closer than she usually did, and he caught the faint scent of lavender. "We worked miracles together. I could not have done any of this without your help." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky change colors as the sun set. Yates was acutely aware of her presence, the warmth of her beside him, the sound of her breathing. He wanted to reach for her hand but was not sure if he had the right. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said quietly. "Of course. Why did you never marry? A man like you, with a ranch and prospects, surely there have been women interested." Yates considered the question. "I suppose I never met anyone who understood what this life requires. The isolation, the hard work, the uncertainty. My mother used to say I was too particular, that I was looking for someone who did not exist. And after she died, I guess I stopped looking altogether. It seemed easier to be alone than to risk bringing someone out here who would end up miserable." Clara nodded slowly. "I understand that. After what happened with Thomas, I decided I was better off alone too. It seemed safer." She paused, then added so softly he almost missed it, "but lonely." "Yes," Yates agreed. "Lonely." She turned to face him then, and in the fading light her eyes were very green and very serious. "I am glad I answered your advertisement. Even if nothing else comes of it, I am glad I came here." Yates felt his heart beating harder. "I am glad you came too, Clara, more glad than I know how to say." They stayed there on the porch until full darkness fell and the stars came out in their thousands, talking about everything and nothing. And when they finally said good night and went to their separate rooms, Yates lay awake for a long time thinking about the way her hand had briefly touched his, about the softness in her voice, about the possibility of not being lonely anymore. The next morning, everything felt different, charged with a new energy that made Yates clumsy and hyper-aware. He burned the bacon at breakfast, forgot to latch the chicken coop properly, and caught himself staring at Clara while she worked in the garden until she looked up and caught him. "Is something wrong?" she asked, shading her eyes against the morning sun. "No, nothing is wrong." He cleared his throat. "I was just thinking that maybe we should go into town this weekend, together. There is a dance at the community hall on Saturday night." Clara straightened up, surprise evident on her face. "A dance, if you would like to go with me," as he trailed off, suddenly uncertain. She smiled, slow and warm. As a courting couple, the phrase hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Yates took a breath. "Yes. If you would be amenable to that." "I would be very amenable to that." Her smile widened. "Though I should warn you, I have not danced in several years. I may be quite terrible at it now. Then we will be terrible together. I am not exactly known for my grace." They stood there grinning at each other like fools until Clara laughed and went back to her weeding. And Yates went to check on the cattle with a lightness in his step that had not been there in years. Saturday evening they dressed in their best clothes and made the trip into Hecla as the sun was setting. Clara wore the blue dress again, and she had done something different with her hair, pinning it up in a way that showed the graceful line of her neck. Yates had shaved carefully and put on the suit he usually reserved for funerals, and he drove the wagon with more attention than necessary, aware of Clara beside him and the significance of what they were doing. The community hall was crowded when they arrived, full of ranch families and townspeople, the air thick with conversation and laughter. A fiddle band was setting up in one corner, and tables laden with food lined one wall. As Yates and Clara entered, he felt the conversations pause, felt eyes turning toward them. He squared his shoulders and offered Clara his arm, which she took with a small, defiant lift of her chin. They had barely made it 3 steps into the room when Sarah Patterson, the boarding house owner, approached them with a warm smile. "Clara dear, how wonderful to see you. And Yates, it has been too long. How is the ranch?" Her friendly greeting seemed to break the ice, and other people began to approach, greeting them with varying degrees of warmth. Some were genuinely welcoming, others were clearly just curious, but Yates kept Clara close to his side and introduced her as if she were already something precious to him. When the music started, he led her onto the makeshift dance floor, and they joined the other couples in a lively reel. Clara had not been lying about her dancing. She was indeed rusty, but Yates found he did not care. He was too busy watching the joy on her face, the way she laughed when she stumbled, the unself-conscious way she moved in his arms. Between dances, they stood to the side catching their breath, and Yates noticed Marcus Thornton approaching them. Marcus owned one of the larger ranches north of town, and he had always been friendly enough, but there was something in his expression now that put Yates on edge. "Yates, good to see you," Marcus said, nodding politely. Then he turned to Clara. "And you must be Miss Meadows. I have heard quite a bit about you." "Mr. Thornton," Clara said carefully, "it is nice to meet you. I heard you are working wonders with gardens." "My wife has been struggling with ours, cannot seem to get anything to grow properly. I do not suppose you would be willing to take on additional work. We would pay well." Before Clara could respond, Yates spoke up. "Miss Meadows is fully employed at my ranch. She does not have time for additional projects." Marcus raised his eyebrows. "I was asking the lady, not you, Yates. Perhaps she would like to make that decision herself." Clara glanced at Yates, something unreadable in her expression, then turned back to Marcus. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Thornton, but as Yates said, my work at the Ashford Ranch keeps me quite busy. Perhaps I could offer some advice to your wife if she wanted to visit sometime. Marcus looked between them, a slow smile spreading across his face. I see. Well, in that case, I wish you both well. Though if things change, the offer stands. After he walked away, Clara touched Yates's arm lightly. You were very quick to speak for me. I apologize. That was inappropriate. You can make your own decisions about where you work. She shook her head. I am not angry. I was just surprised. And she hesitated, then continued, and pleased, I think, that you did not want me to go work for someone else. Yates looked down at her, at this strong, capable woman who had walked into his life just weeks ago and changed everything. I do not want you to go anywhere. I know we have not known each other long, and I know the situation is complicated, but Clara, He stopped, aware that they were standing in the middle of a crowded dance hall having a conversation that felt far too private. Take me outside. Clara asked quietly. They slipped out the back door into the cool evening air, away from the noise and crowd. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light over the street and the buildings beyond. They walked a short distance from the hall, to where the sounds of music and voices faded to a pleasant background murmur. What were you going to say in there? Clara asked, turning to face him. Yates looked at her in the moonlight, her face turned up to his, and felt the words rising up with an urgency he could not contain. I was going to say that I am falling in love with you. Maybe have been since the first day I saw you sitting on that boarding house porch. I know it is fast, and I know the circumstances are unusual, but I cannot pretend anymore that this is just about the garden or about employment. You have become essential to me, Clara. The thought of you going somewhere else, of not seeing you every day, is unbearable. Clara was very still, her eyes searching his face. You are falling in love with me. Yes. He took a breath. But I will not pressure you. If you do not feel the same way, we can go back to how things were. I can still employ you and we can be friends, and I will keep my feelings to myself. I just needed you to know the truth. She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. Yates Ashford, you are possibly the most honorable man I have ever met, and the kindest. And the most frustrating, because I have been trying to figure out how to tell you the same thing for weeks now. His heart stuttered. The same thing. That I am falling in love with you too. That coming to work on your ranch was the best decision I ever made. That when I think about my future now, I cannot imagine it without you in it. She reached up and touched his face, her palm warm against his cheek. I am done being afraid of getting hurt. I am done playing it safe. If you will have me, Yates, not just as your employee but as your partner, your equal, then I am saying yes to that. Yates felt like he might be dreaming, but if so, he never wanted to wake up. He covered her hand with his, holding it against his face. I want nothing more. But I want to do this right. I want to court you properly, Clara. I want everyone in town to know that my intentions are honorable. And when the time is right, I want to marry you, if you will have me. When the time is right, I will definitely have you, Clara said, and then she rose up on her toes and kissed him. It was a brief kiss, soft and sweet, but it sealed something between them that felt permanent and right. When they broke apart, they were both smiling like idiots, standing in the moonlight behind the Hecla Community Hall, and Yates thought that his mother would have loved this moment, would have loved Clara. They went back inside hand in hand, and if anyone noticed the change between them, the new easiness and intimacy, no one said anything directly. They danced several more dances, and this time when Clara stumbled, Yates caught her close and did not let go for longer than strictly necessary, and she did not seem to mind at all. The ride home that night was different from the ride into town. Clara sat pressed against his side, her head occasionally resting on his shoulder, and they talked about their plans. Not just for the garden, but for the ranch, for their lives. Clara spoke about expanding the herb garden, about maybe selling surplus vegetables and preserves in town for extra income. Yates talked about wanting to build a better barn, about increasing the herd, about making the ranch into something that could support a family. A family, Clara repeated softly. I like the sound of that. You want children? Yates asked, then worried he was moving too fast. I am sorry, that is probably too much to ask right now. It is not too much, and yes, I want children. I always have, even when I thought it might not happen for me. Do you? Yes. My mother always said she wanted grandchildren, wanted to see the ranch continue into another generation. I used to think that would never happen, but now. He looked at Clara, at this woman who had appeared in his life like an answer to a prayer he had not known he was praying. Now I can imagine it all, the whole future with you. When they arrived back at the ranch, Yates helped Clara down from the wagon, but instead of going immediately inside, they stood together looking up at the stars. The night was clear and cool, the air smelling of sage and the distant mountains. I am happy, Clara said simply. I do not think I have said that honestly in years, but right now, standing here with you, I am deeply happy. Yates wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned back against him with a sigh of contentment. So am I. We should probably go inside, though, before the coyotes start getting ideas about the chickens. She laughed and turned in his arms. Ever the practical rancher. But she kissed him again, less briefly this time, and Yates thought that if there was a heaven, it probably felt a lot like this. The next weeks unfolded in a haze of work and courting and learning to be two people building something together. Clara continued to tend the garden, which was now producing its first harvest of lettuce and radishes and early herbs. Yates worked his ranch with renewed energy, fixing things he had let slide, making improvements he had not cared about when it was just him. They took their meals together, sitting at the kitchen table talking long after the food was gone, and in the evenings they would sit on the porch, sometimes talking, sometimes just being together in comfortable silence. On Sundays, they drove into Hecla for church, and Yates took satisfaction in introducing Clara as his intended, in seeing the respect she garnered from the townspeople as they got to know her. She was asked for gardening advice, for remedies for various ailments, and she gave her knowledge freely and without judgment. Slowly, the whispers and gossip faded, replaced by genuine acceptance and welcome. One Sunday afternoon in mid-August, they packed a picnic and rode out to a spot Yates loved, a meadow high in the hills where wildflowers grew in profusion, and you could see for miles in every direction. They spread a blanket and ate cold chicken and fresh bread, and Clara made a crown of flowers that she placed on Yates's head, laughing at how ridiculous he looked. I do not think I have ever seen you this relaxed, she said, lying back on the blanket with her hands behind her head, looking up at the endless blue sky. Yates lay down beside her, turning on his side so he could see her face. I have not felt this relaxed in years, maybe ever. You have changed everything for me, Clara. She rolled to face him, her expression suddenly serious. You have changed everything for me, too. When I left Ohio, I thought I was running away from something terrible. But really, I was running toward this, toward you. I just did not know it yet. He reached out and traced the line of her jaw with his finger. I love you. I know I already told you, but I want to keep saying it. I love you, Clara Meadows. I love you too, Yates Ashford. She caught his hand and pressed a kiss to his palm. So when are you going to officially propose to me? I am getting impatient, he laughed. Impatient? It has only been 2 months since you arrived. Yes, and I have known I wanted to marry you for at least 6 weeks of those 2 months, so I am definitely impatient. Yates sat up, his heart suddenly pounding. Are you saying you would marry me right now if I asked? Clara sat up too, her eyes bright. I am saying that I do not need a long courtship or a fancy proposal. I know what I want, and I want you. I want to be your wife and build a life with you and grow old together tending that garden. So yes, if you ask me right now, I would say yes without hesitation. He looked at her, this brave, practical, wonderful woman, and realized she was absolutely right. Why wait when they both knew what they wanted? He got up on one knee right there on the blanket in the wildflower meadow and took her hands in his. Clara Meadows, would you do me the immense honor of becoming my wife? I promise to love you and respect you and partner with you in all things. I promise to support your work and your dreams. I promise to tend that garden with you for as long as we both shall live. Will you marry me? Clara was laughing and crying at the same time, tears streaming down her face as she nodded vigorously. Yes, absolutely yes, you ridiculous, wonderful man. Yes, I will marry you. He pulled her down into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, and they lay there on the blanket for a long time, wrapped around each other, making plans and dreaming dreams and feeling like the luckiest people in Montana. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Hecla, with half the town in attendance. Clara wore a simple white dress that she sewed herself, and Yates wore his suit, and when he saw her walking down the aisle toward him, he felt his eyes burn with tears. She was so beautiful, and she was choosing him, and the whole thing felt like a miracle. The ceremony was brief, the words familiar and ancient and weighted with meaning. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and told Yates he could kiss his bride, Yates cradled Clara's face in his hands and kissed her gently, reverently, aware of the sacredness of the moment. This was his wife, his partner, his future. They held the wedding reception in the community hall, and people came up to offer congratulations and give gifts. Practical things mostly, kitchen items and linens and tools, but each one given with genuine warmth. Sarah Patterson pulled Clara aside and whispered something that made Clara laugh and blush, and Marcus Thornton shook Yates's hand and said, "You are a lucky man, Ashford. Treat her well." "I intend to," Yates replied, and meant it with every fiber of his being. As the afternoon wore into evening and people began to drift home, Yates and Clara climbed into their wagon for the ride back to the ranch. But this time, Clara was not his employee or even just his beloved. She was his wife, and the knowledge settled over him with a rightness that felt like coming home. "I am never going to get used to how beautiful this country is," Clara said as they drove through the Montana hills in the golden evening light. "I spent so many years in Ohio looking at the same flat fields, the same small horizons. This feels like the whole world opened up." "It can be harsh, though," Yates warned. "The winters are brutal, the summers can be too hot or too dry, the isolation gets to some people." Clara turned to look at him with a smile. "Yates, I grew up poor with dead parents in a small town that eventually turned against me. I know all about harsh, and I know that with you beside me, I can handle whatever Montana throws at us." They spent their first night as a married couple in the house that was now fully theirs, no longer divided into employer and employee, no longer careful about boundaries and propriety. Clara moved her few belongings into Yates's room, which was now their room, and they lay in bed together talking until late into the night, mapping out their future. "I want to expand the garden next year," Clara said, her head on Yates's chest, his arms wrapped around her. "Your mother had good instincts about the layout, but I think we could add another section over on the east side where the ground gets good morning sun. We could grow even more vegetables, maybe some melons." "Whatever you want," Yates said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Though I do want to build a bigger barn first. The current one is falling apart, and we will need more space if we increase the herd like I want to. We will do both. We will build your barn and expand my garden and make this ranch into something amazing." She paused, then added softly, "And maybe start our family if we are blessed that way." Yates tightened his arms around her. "I would like that very much." The seasons turned, and autumn came to Montana in a blaze of gold and red. The garden produced abundantly, more than they could eat, and Clara spent long days preserving and canning, filling the shelves in the cellar with jars of vegetables and jams and pickles. Yates hired a crew to help build the new barn, and Clara would bring them lunch each day. And Yates would watch her charming the workers with her easy manner and feel pride that she was his. In October, 2 years to the day after his mother died, Yates took Clara to the small family cemetery on the ranch property where both his parents were buried. He laid flowers on the graves, wildflowers that Clara had picked and arranged, and he talked to his mother the way he sometimes did, telling her about Clara and the garden and how happy he was. "She would have loved you," he told Clara as they stood hand in hand between the graves. "She would have loved how you brought her garden back to life, how you brought me back to life." Clara squeezed his hand. "I wish I could have known her, but I like to think that maybe she sent me to you somehow, that she knew you needed someone and put the idea in my head to come to Montana." "I like to think that too." Winter came early and hard that year, with snow falling in late November and not letting up for weeks. Yates and Clara spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other or playing cards or just talking. Sometimes they would bundle up and go out to check on the animals together, trudging through snow that came up to their knees, laughing at how ridiculous they looked covered in ice and frost. It was during one of those long winter nights that Clara told him she was pregnant. They were sitting by the fire, Yates mending a harness and Clara knitting, when she set down her work and said, "I have something to tell you." Something in her voice made him look up. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine. Better than fine. I am pregnant, Yates. We are going to have a baby." For a moment he could not process the words. Then their meaning hit him and he dropped the harness, crossing to her chair and kneeling in front of her. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be. I have missed my courses twice now, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings. Plus my grandmother taught me the signs to look for." She was smiling through tears. "We are going to have a baby." Yates laid his hand on her still flat stomach, awe washing through him. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. Clara, this is." He could not find words big enough to contain what he felt. "I know," she said, covering his hand with hers. "I know." The pregnancy progressed through the winter and into spring, and Yates watched Clara's body change with a mix of wonder and concern. She was often tired and occasionally sick, but she remained stubbornly determined to work in the garden as soon as the ground thawed. Yates found himself constantly worrying about her, trying to get her to rest more, to let him handle the heavy work. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she finally told him after he tried to stop her from carrying a basket of seedlings. "Women have been having babies and working through it since the beginning of time. I will be fine. I know, I just worry. I could not bear it if something happened to you or the baby." She softened and kissed his cheek. "Nothing is going to happen to either of us, but I appreciate your concern, even when it is overbearing." As the garden came back to life in the spring, so did the roses. The bushes that Clara had cut back so severely the previous year burst forth with new growth, and in late June they bloomed for the first time in years. Deep red roses, dozens of them, filling the air with their scent. Clara stood in front of them with tears running down her face, one hand on her swollen belly, and Yates came to stand beside her. "Your mother's roses," she said. "They came back. You brought them back. You brought everything back." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, cradling her pregnant belly. "Including me." The baby came in late July, during a thunderstorm that shook the house with its fury. Yates had ridden into town to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Patterson's daughter Martha, who had delivered half the babies in the county, and they made it back just before the storm broke in full force. Clara labored through the night while thunder rolled overhead and lightning split the sky, and Yates paced outside the bedroom door feeling utterly helpless and terrified. When dawn broke, the storm had passed, and the sound of a baby crying filled the house. Martha emerged from the bedroom with a tired smile. "You have a son, Mr. Ashford, a big, healthy boy, and your wife did beautifully." Yates barely heard the rest of her words. He was already moving into the bedroom where Clara lay exhausted and radiant in the bed, a tiny bundle in her arms. She looked up at him with a smile that was pure joy. "Come meet your son," she said. Yates approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe. Clara pulled back the blanket to reveal a red, wrinkled face, eyes squinted shut, tiny fists waving. The baby was perfect and terrifying, and the most beautiful thing Yates had ever seen besides Clara herself. "Can I hold him?" "Of course. He is your son." Yates carefully took the baby, supporting the small head the way Clara showed him, and looked down into that tiny face. His son. His and Clara's son. The continuation of his family, of the ranch, of everything his parents had built. "What should we name him?" Clara asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had not decided on anything definite. Now, looking at his son in the dawn light, Yates knew. "I would like to name him William, after my father." "William James Ashford," Clara smiled. "William, I like it. Hello, William. Welcome to the family." The baby's eyes opened briefly, unfocused but seeming to look at them, and then closed again as he settled into sleep. Yates carefully returned him to Clara's arms and sat on the edge of the bed, looking at his wife and son, his family, and felt a gratitude so profound it was almost painful. "Thank you," he said, "for all of this, for coming into my life, for marrying me, for giving me this gift." Clara reached for his hand. "Thank you for hiring me to tend your garden, for giving me a home and a purpose and a love I never thought I would find, for being exactly who you are." They sat together as the morning sun grew stronger, streaming through the window to illuminate the small room, the new family, the future they had built together from soil and hope and stubborn determination. William proved to be a healthy, hungry baby who demanded attention at all hours. Yates took over more of the ranch work so Clara could rest when the baby slept, and in the evenings they would sit together while Clara nursed William and Yates read aloud or just watched his family with contentment. The summer passed in a blur of sleepless nights and precious moments. William grew rapidly, changing almost daily, and Yates found himself constantly amazed by the reality of fatherhood. He would wake in the night to feed William a bottle of milk Clara had expressed earlier, walking the floor of the main room while the baby fussed, talking to him about the ranch and the cattle and all the things he would teach him someday. Clara recovered her strength and was soon back in the garden, with William in a basket in the shade nearby, watching the clouds drift by. She had help now. A young woman from town named Alice, who came 3 days a week to help with the housework and watch the baby when Clara needed both hands for garden tasks. It gave Clara more freedom, and Yates liked seeing how the garden continued to expand under her care, how she was building something lasting and productive. That fall, Marcus Thornton came by the ranch with a proposition. His own spread was doing well, and he wanted to partner with Yates on a cattle drive to Great Falls in the spring, pooling their herds and splitting the costs and risks. It would mean significant income if successful, and could establish them both as serious ranchers rather than just small operators. Yates discussed it with Clara that evening after William had been put down for the night. "It would mean I would be gone for at least 3 weeks, maybe a month. I do not like the idea of leaving you and William alone that long." Clara considered. "Could we hire someone to help while you are gone? Someone to handle the heavy work around the ranch. I can manage the garden and the household, but it would be good to have another man around for security, and for tasks I cannot handle alone with a baby." "That is a good idea. Maybe one of the younger men from town who wants to learn ranching. I could pay him with part of my share from the cattle drive profits." They decided to accept Marcus's offer, and Yates spent the winter months preparing for the drive. But winter also brought its own challenges. In January, a cold snap hit that was brutal even by Montana standards, and they huddled in the house trying to keep warm while the temperature dropped far below zero. Yates had to check on the animals constantly, making sure they had shelter and water that had not frozen solid, and he would come back into the house with icicles in his beard, and his fingers numb despite thick gloves. During one of those bitter nights, with the wind howling around the house and the fire struggling to keep the room warm, Clara wrapped herself and William in quilts and sat close to Yates. "Tell me about Kentucky," she said. "About where your mother came from. I want to know more about her." So Yates told stories his mother had told him, about the green hills and humid summers of Kentucky, about her family's small farm and her childhood there, about how she had met his father when he came through with a wagon train heading west, how she had fallen in love with his dreams of building something new, and how she had left everything she knew to follow him to Montana. "She used to say that love meant choosing someone's dreams as your own," Yates said. "That when you truly loved someone, their happiness became as important as your own survival." Clara looked down at William sleeping in her arms. "That is exactly what it is. When I look at him, I would do anything, endure anything to keep him safe and happy, and I feel the same about you. I feel the same about both of you. You two are my whole world now." They survived the winter, as people did in Montana, through stubbornness and preparation, and the knowledge that spring always came eventually. And when it did come, the garden exploded into life with an enthusiasm that seemed to make up for the months of dormancy. Clara was in her element, directing the planting, tending the seedlings, and teaching William, now almost a year old, about the different plants. "This is a carrot," she would tell him, letting him touch the feathery green tops. "And this is a tomato plant. Smell the leaves. Smell that. That is what summer smells like." Yates would watch them from a distance, his capable wife and his curious son, and marvel at how his life had been transformed. 3 years ago he had been alone, struggling, letting his mother's garden die from neglect. Now he had a family, a thriving ranch, and a future full of promise. In late April, the day came for the cattle drive to begin. Yates packed his gear with mixed feelings, excited for the opportunity but dreading the separation from his family. Clara helped him load the wagon, checking and rechecking that he had everything he needed. "You will be careful?" she asked for the 10th time. "I will be very careful, and you will be all right here with Thomas helping out." Thomas was the young man they had hired, a capable 18-year-old who was eager to learn ranching and had already proven himself reliable. "We will be fine. Thomas is good with the heavy work, and Alice comes regularly. Between the 3 of us, we can handle a few weeks. You just focus on the drive and come home safe." William, now walking unsteadily but with great determination, wrapped his arms around Yates's leg. "Dada, stay." Yates crouched down and hugged his son. "Dada has to go for a little while, but I will come back, I promise." "You take care of Mama while I am gone, all right?" William nodded solemnly, not really understanding but sensing the importance of the moment. Yates turned to Clara and pulled her into a tight embrace. "I love you, both of you. I will be back before you know it. I love you too. Now go, before I start crying and make this harder than it already is." He kissed her thoroughly, kissed William's head, and then climbed into the wagon before he could change his mind. As he drove away, he looked back to see Clara holding William, both of them waving, and he had to swallow hard against the lump in his throat. The cattle drive was everything he expected. Hard work, long days, nights spent under the stars, and the constant tension of managing livestock across open country. But it was also successful. They reached Great Falls with minimal losses, and the cattle sold for better prices than Yates had dared hope. When Marcus handed him his share of the profits, Yates stared at the amount written on the bank draft and felt his future expand. He bought supplies in Great Falls that they needed for the ranch, including a new plow and tools he had been making do without. He also bought gifts for his family: a beautiful shawl for Clara, wooden toys for William, and fabric for new clothes. When he finally turned the wagon toward home, he felt satisfaction in his work, but also an urgency to get back to his family that increased with every mile. He arrived in the late afternoon of a beautiful May day, and as the ranch came into view he could see Clara in the garden, William playing in the dirt beside her. She looked up at the sound of the wagon, shaded her eyes, and then she was running toward him, William forgotten in her excitement. Yates jumped down from the wagon and caught her in his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. "You are home, you are finally home. I missed you so much. I missed you too, every single day." He set her down and looked her over. "You look beautiful." "Radiant, actually," she blushed. "Well, there is a reason for that. Yates, I am pregnant again." He stared at her, processing the words. "Again? Already? But William is barely a year old." "I know. I found out just a few days after you left. I almost sent word to you on the drive, but I decided to wait and tell you in person." She was smiling, but there was uncertainty in her eyes. "Are you happy about it?" "Happy, Clara, I am." He pulled her back into his arms. "I am thrilled. Overwhelmed maybe, but thrilled. 2 children. We are going to have 2 children." William had toddled over, clearly unhappy about being momentarily forgotten, and Yates scooped him up. "Did you hear that, William? You are going to be a big brother." William looked confused, but he smiled at having his father's attention again, and they stood there together, a family of soon-to-be 4, surrounded by the garden that had brought them together in the first place. The summer passed in contentment. Yates used some of the cattle drive money to make improvements to the ranch, including a new smokehouse and repairs to the fences. Clara's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and she continued working in the garden as much as she was able, though Yates and Thomas took over more of the physical labor as she got bigger. "I feel like a cow," Clara complained one evening in late summer, her hands on her swollen belly. Yates came to sit beside her on the porch, pulling her feet into his lap and rubbing them gently. "You look beautiful. You always look beautiful, but especially now, carrying our child. You are required to say that because you are my husband and you did this to me." He grinned. "Guilty. But I mean it nonetheless." William was fascinated by his mother's changing shape, patting her belly and talking to the baby in his limited vocabulary. Clara had explained to him that there was a baby growing inside her, and William had accepted this information with the easy adaptability of a toddler. "Baby come out?" he would ask frequently. "Soon," Clara would tell him. "The baby will come out soon." The baby came in mid-October, during harvest time when the garden was full of pumpkins and squash and the air smelled of autumn. This labor was faster than the first, and by the time Martha the midwife arrived, Clara was already well into the process. Yates stayed with her this time, holding her hand through the contractions, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, offering what comfort he could. When the baby emerged just before dawn, Martha announced, "A girl this time, and she has a set of lungs on her." Indeed, the baby's cries were lusty and strong, and Yates felt his heart expand to accommodate this new person. Another child, a daughter. He had a son and a daughter. Clara was exhausted but smiling as Martha placed the baby in her arms. "A girl! Oh, Yates, look at her. She is perfect." Yates looked down at his daughter's face, seeing features that reminded him of his mother and also of Clara, a blending of family lines into something new and precious. "She is perfect. What should we name her?" They had discussed this too, and Clara said without hesitation, "I would like to name her after your mother." "What was her name?" "Rosemary. Rosemary Ann Ashford," Clara smiled. "Then we will call her Rosemary, or Rose, for the roses she brought back to life." "Rose," Yates repeated, looking at his daughter. "Hello, Rose. Welcome to the family." William was introduced to his sister later that morning, peering at the baby with intense curiosity. "Baby," he announced, poking her gently with one finger. "Gentle," Clara instructed. "You have to be very gentle with baby Rose." "Rose," William repeated solemnly, and from that moment on he appointed himself her protector, always concerned about where she was and if she was all right. Life with two young children was chaotic and exhausting and wonderful. Yates and Clara fell into new routines, dividing childcare responsibilities while still managing the ranch and garden. Clara was an efficient mother, handling the demands of nursing and diaper changes and sleepless nights with the same practical competence she brought to everything. But Yates also noticed the toll it took on her, the permanent tiredness in her eyes, the way she moved more slowly. "We need more help," he told her one evening after she had spent a full day working in the garden, caring for two children and cooking meals for the family. "This is too much for one person." "We have Alice," Clara protested. 3 days a week is not enough. What if we brought Alice on full time, and maybe hired another hand to help Thomas so I can be around the house more to help you with the children?" Clara was quiet for a moment. "Can we afford that? The cattle drive profits were good, and if we do another drive this spring, we can definitely afford it." "Clara, I want you to have help. I want you to not be exhausted all the time. You work too hard." She smiled at him. "We both work hard. That is what building a life requires." "True. But we can work smarter, not just harder. Let me hire more help, please." She reached for his hand. "All right, you are probably right. I just hate admitting that I cannot do everything myself." "No one can do everything themselves. That is why we have each other, and why we build communities. We are not meant to struggle alone." They hired Alice full-time and also brought on another ranch hand, a young Mexican man named Diego who had come north looking for work and proved to be excellent with horses. The additional help made an immediate difference. Clara had more time to rest, more time to spend with the children without being constantly pulled in 10 directions, and Yates could balance his ranch work with family time more effectively. The years began to pass in a rhythm of seasons and growth. William grew into a bright, curious boy who followed his father everywhere, learning the work of the ranch. Rose was more reserved than her brother, but had a stubborn determination that reminded Yates strongly of Clara. The garden expanded each year, becoming not just a food source but something of a local attraction. People from town would come to buy seedlings and fresh vegetables, and Clara developed a reputation as someone who could grow anything and knew the medicinal properties of every plant. In the spring of 1882, when William was 5 and Rose was 3, Clara discovered she was pregnant again. They were sitting at breakfast when she made the announcement, and William immediately had questions. "Another baby. Where will we put it?" Yates laughed. "We will figure that out. Are you excited to be a big brother again?" William considered this seriously. "I guess so. As long as the baby does not cry all the time like Rose did." "I did not cry all the time," Rose protested with a 5-year-old's indignation. "Yes, you did. You cried and nobody could sleep." Clara intervened before the argument could escalate. "All babies cry sometimes. It is how they communicate. But you will both be wonderful older siblings, I know it." This pregnancy was harder on Clara than the previous ones. She was 31 now, not old by any means, but 3 pregnancies in 5 years had taken their toll. She tired more easily, and there were days when she could barely keep food down. Yates worried constantly, hovering over her until she snapped at him to give her some space. "I am fine," she insisted. "Just pregnant. It will pass." But when the baby came in early December, the labor was long and difficult. Yates paced outside the bedroom for hours while Martha and Alice attended to Clara, listening to her cries and feeling helpless. When the baby finally arrived, a healthy boy they named Thomas after Yates's grandfather, Martha emerged from the bedroom looking exhausted and serious. "Mother and baby are both fine. But Yates, you need to understand that another pregnancy would be very risky for Clara. Her body needs time to recover, several years at least, if not permanently." Yates felt cold fear wash through him. "Are you saying she could die if she got pregnant again?" "I am saying it would be dangerous. Not certain death, but dangerous enough that I would strongly advise against it. You two need to be careful." He went into the bedroom where Clara lay pale and exhausted, the new baby in her arms. She looked up at him with a tired smile. "Did Martha lecture you about how I should not get pregnant again?" "She did. Clara, I had no idea this was so hard on you." "It is hard on every woman. That is the reality of bearing children. But Yates, I do not regret any of it. Not William, not Rose, not Thomas. Each one is worth whatever pain it costs to bring them into the world." He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at his 3rd child, another son. "He is beautiful. They are all beautiful. But I do not want to lose you, Clara. I cannot lose you. So we will be careful from now on. We will make sure there are no more pregnancies." 3 is a good number anyway," Clara said. "A nice round family. And honestly, I am too tired to even think about doing this again." Thomas proved to be an easy baby, which was a blessing given how exhausted Clara was. He slept well, nursed efficiently, and seemed content to observe the world from wherever he was placed. William and Rose were fascinated by their new brother, competing to help take care of him, and the house was constantly full of noise and activity and life. Yates watched his family grow and thrive, and felt a satisfaction deeper than anything he had known before Clara. The ranch was prosperous, the garden was legendary in the area, and his children were healthy and happy. Sometimes he would stand in the evening and look at it all. The house with lights glowing in the windows, Clara in the garden even after a long day, the children playing in the yard, and feel overwhelmed by gratitude. One evening in the summer after Thomas was born, Yates and Clara managed to steal a few moments alone while Alice watched the children. They sat on the porch in the gathering dusk, and Clara leaned against him with a contented sigh. "You remember that first day you came out here?" Yates asked. "When I picked you up in Hecla and you looked at the garden like it was a lost cause," Clara laughed softly. "I never thought it was a lost cause. I thought it was a challenge, and I remember thinking that you seemed sad, like you had given up on something important. I wanted to fix the garden, but I also wanted to fix whatever was making you look so lost. You did fix it. You fixed everything. You took a dying garden and a dying man and brought us both back to life." She turned to look at him. We fixed each other, Yates. I was just as lost as you were when I came here, maybe more so. You gave me a home and a purpose and a reason to believe in second chances. You gave me everything I had stopped believing I could have. He kissed her forehead. I love you, Clara Ashford. More than I ever thought it was possible to love another person. I love you too. And I would do it all again, every hard moment, every struggle, because it all led me to you. They sat together as the stars came out one by one, counting their blessings and holding on to each other, and the life they had built from nothing but hope and hard work and love. The years continued to unfold. William grew into a responsible young boy who could handle ranch tasks with competence beyond his years. Rose developed a passion for the garden that rivaled her mother's, spending hours learning the names and properties of plants. Thomas was a happy child who found joy in simple things and could make anyone laugh with his antics. In 1884, when William was 7, Rose was 5, and Thomas was 2, Yates and Clara celebrated their 6th wedding anniversary. They had a small party with friends from town, and Marcus Thornton gave a toast that made Clara blush and Yates grin with pride. I have known Yates Ashford most of his life, Marcus said, raising his glass. And I can honestly say I have never seen him as happy as he has been these past 6 years. Clara, you have transformed not just his ranch and his garden, but the man himself. To you both, and to many more years of happiness. Everyone drank to the toast, and later that night after the guests had left and the children were asleep, Clara and Yates lay in bed talking about their life. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had not put up that notice in town? Clara asked. If you had never seen it, or if you had decided not to hire me? I try not to think about that, Yates admitted. It is too terrible to contemplate, but I do think about how lucky we are. How many things had to align perfectly for us to find each other. Your decision to come to Montana, my mother's garden dying, the timing of everything. It feels like fate, or blessing, Clara said. I like to think that somewhere, your mother and my grandmother are happy knowing what we built together. I am sure they are. My mother would have loved you. She would have loved seeing her garden restored and seeing her grandchildren playing in it. I wish I could have known her. But I try to honor her memory by caring for the things she loved. The garden, the ranch, you. Yates pulled her closer. You honor her memory just by being who you are. In the autumn of 1885, Yates received word that his mother's family in Kentucky, relatives he had never met, had left him a small inheritance. It was not a fortune, but it was enough to make a significant difference to the ranch. He and Clara discussed how to use the money, and ultimately decided to invest it in expanding their operation and making improvements that would benefit their children's future. They added on to the house, creating separate bedrooms for the children and a proper room for Alice, who had become essentially part of the family. They bought more cattle and better breeding stock. And Clara used some of the money to build a proper greenhouse, a luxury that would extend the growing season and allow her to start seedlings earlier in the spring. The greenhouse became Clara's pride and joy, a warm sanctuary in winter where she could nurture plants and plan for the seasons ahead. She taught Rose how to care for the seedlings, and the two of them would spend hours in the greenhouse together, talking about plants and life and everything under the sun. William, meanwhile, had become indispensable to Yates on the ranch. At 9 years old, he could ride as well as many adult men, could rope cattle with accuracy, and had a natural understanding of animal behavior. Yates began teaching him the business side of ranching, explaining how to manage finances and make decisions about buying and selling stock. Someday this will all be yours, Yates told him one day as they rode the fence line checking for breaks. You and Rose and Thomas will inherit the ranch together. I want you to be prepared to run it well." William looked at his father seriously. "I will not let you down, Pa, I promise." "I know you will not. You are already a better rancher than I was at your age. Your grandmother would be proud of you." Thomas, at 5, was still young enough to spend most of his time playing and exploring, but he showed signs of inheriting his mother's interest in growing things. He would follow Clara and Rose around the garden, asking endless questions about why things grew the way they did, and Clara would answer with infinite patience. "He is going to be a farmer, not a rancher," Yates predicted one evening, watching Thomas carefully plant seeds in the garden with intense concentration. "He can be both," Clara replied. "There is no rule that says he has to choose one or the other. Besides, the best ranchers understand agriculture too. It all works together." In 1887, tragedy struck when Martha, the midwife who had delivered all 3 of their children, died suddenly from a heart ailment. The whole community mourned her loss, but Clara felt it particularly deeply. Martha had been not just a helper but a friend and advisor, someone Clara could turn to for guidance about motherhood and medicine and women's concerns. At Martha's funeral, Clara stood between Yates and Sarah Patterson, holding tightly to Yates's hand as the preacher spoke about Martha's life of service. Later, at the reception, several women approached Clara to ask if she would consider taking over some of Martha's work. Not the midwifery necessarily, but the healing work, the herbal remedies and medical advice that Clara had learned from her grandmother. "People trust you," Sarah told her. "You have Martha's knowledge and her gentle way with people. It would be a shame for that knowledge to be lost." Clara was uncertain, but Yates encouraged her. "You have always helped people when they asked. This would just be making it official, and it would bring in additional income, which is never a bad thing." So Clara began taking on a role as the local healer, people coming to the ranch to ask about remedies for various ailments, or Clara going into town to tend to someone who was ill. She kept careful records of what worked and what did not, adding to the knowledge her grandmother had passed down. And she began teaching Rose, who was now 10, and showed a real aptitude for healing work. The ranch continued to prosper. The cattle drives brought in steady income, the garden produced abundantly, and Clara's healing work added to their resources. They were not rich by any means, but they were comfortable, secure in a way that Yates had never quite been before Clara. In the spring of 1889, William turned 12 and announced that he wanted to go on the cattle drive with Yates and the other men. Yates was hesitant, knowing how hard and dangerous the drives could be, but William was insistent. "I am old enough, Pa. I can do the work. I know I can. And I need to learn from actual experience, not just from helping around the ranch." Clara sided with William. "He is ready, Yates. I know you want to protect him, but he needs this. He needs to test himself and prove he can handle adult responsibilities." So Yates reluctantly agreed, and William went on his first cattle drive with barely contained excitement. The month William was gone was hard on Clara, who worried constantly despite her confident words to Yates. But when father and son returned, both exhausted but triumphant, William with his first real wages in his pocket, Clara had to admit that he seemed to have grown years in just a few weeks. "You were right," Yates told her that night. "He was ready. He did well, Clara, better than well. He worked as hard as any of the men, and he never complained once. I was proud of him." "I am glad," Clara said. "But I am also glad I have a few more years before Thomas is old enough to do the same thing. I do not know if my heart can handle worrying about both of you at once." Rose, meanwhile, had developed into a thoughtful, serious 12-year-old with her mother's intelligence and her father's work ethic. She helped Clara with the healing work, learning quickly and asking insightful questions. She also maintained the garden with skill and had started experimenting with crossbreeding different plant varieties to create improved versions. "She is going to surpass both of us," Clara told Yates proudly. "She has real talent, maybe even genius. I would not be surprised if she does something remarkable with plants someday." Thomas, at 7, was the family clown, always ready with a joke or a silly face to make everyone laugh. But beneath the humor was a kind heart and a genuine love for all living things. He could not bear to see anything suffer and was constantly bringing home injured animals to nurse back to health. "Another one," Clara would sigh as Thomas appeared with yet another bird or rabbit or lizard that needed care. "But Ma, I could not just leave it. It was hurt." And Clara would shake her head and help him care for whatever creature he had adopted, because that was who Thomas was, and they loved him for it. In 1891, Yates turned 40 and Clara turned 39. They celebrated quietly, just the family, but it was a time of reflection for both of them. They sat on the porch that evening while the children played in the yard and talked about how much their lives had changed. 15 years ago I was alone and slowly giving up on everything," Yates said. "Now look at all this. 3 amazing children, a prosperous ranch. Sometimes I cannot believe how blessed we are." "I feel the same way," Clara replied. 15 years ago I was running away from scandal and shame, thinking my life was over at 24. Now I have everything I ever wanted and things I did not even know to want. A husband I love, children I adore, work that matters. It is more than I ever dreamed." "Do you ever wish things had been different, that you had not had to go through all that pain in Ohio?" Clara considered the question. "No, I do not. Because if things had been different, I would not have come to Montana. I would not have met you. All the pain and struggle and heartbreak led me here to this life, and I would not trade this for anything. The hard things made me strong enough to appreciate the good things." Yates reached for her hand. "I love you, Clara, as much as the day I married you, more maybe because now I know all the ways you make my life better. I love you too, always have, always will." As their children grew toward adulthood, Yates and Clara began to think about the future and what would happen to the ranch when they were gone. They wanted to make sure it stayed in the family, that the work they had built together would continue through their children. William, now 15, had made it clear that ranching was his passion and his future. He worked alongside Yates with complete confidence now, and they had begun to shift toward a true partnership rather than just father teaching son. Rose, at 13, was torn between several interests. She loved the garden and the healing work, but she had also started talking about going to school, maybe even going east to study botany or medicine properly. Clara encouraged her dreams, even though it meant Rose might leave Montana. "She should have every opportunity," Clara told Yates. "We should not limit her just because she is a girl or because we want her to stay here. If she wants to go to school, we should find a way to make it happen." Thomas, at 9, was still young enough that his future was uncertain, but he had started showing interest in the business side of the ranch. He would sit with Yates while Yates did the books, asking questions about accounting and finances and how to make business decisions. "I think Thomas might end up being the businessman of the family," Yates observed. "He has a head for numbers that neither William nor Rose have." "Good," Clara said. "Then between the 3 of them, they will have all the skills needed to run this place successfully." Ranching from William, agriculture and science from Rose, and business sense from Thomas. They will be unstoppable. In the summer of 1893, Rose was accepted to a women's college in Boston that specialized in science education. It was a huge achievement and a huge challenge, both financially and emotionally. Boston was 2,000 miles away, and Rose would be gone for 4 years. The decision to let her go was difficult but ultimately clear. Rose wanted this opportunity desperately, and Clara and Yates were determined to give their children every chance to reach their full potential. They used savings and took out a small loan to cover the costs, and in September they took Rose to the train station in Hecla to send her off to her new adventure. Clara cried, trying to hide it but failing. Rose hugged her tightly. "I will write every week, Ma, I promise. And I will come home for summers. I know. I am just going to miss you so much, but I am also so proud of you. You are going to do amazing things, Rose." Yates hugged his daughter, feeling the strange mix of pride and loss that comes with watching a child become independent. "You study hard and learn everything you can, and remember that you always have a home here to come back to." "I will, Pa. Thank you for letting me go. Thank you for believing in me." They watched the train pull away, taking their daughter toward her future, and Clara leaned into Yates and cried properly. He held her while William and Thomas stood awkwardly nearby, not sure how to comfort their mother. "She will be fine," Yates said, as much to himself as to Clara. "She is strong and smart, just like her mother. She will thrive." And Rose did thrive. Her letters home were full of excitement about her classes, about the new ideas she was learning, about the other women students who were just as passionate about science as she was. She sent drawings of plant specimens she was studying, and detailed descriptions of experiments she was conducting. Clara read every letter multiple times, sharing them with anyone who would listen, bursting with pride. Meanwhile, William at 17 was essentially running the ranch alongside Yates. They had expanded the herd significantly, and William had proven himself capable of handling the business negotiations and the physical work equally well. He had grown into a tall, strong young man who looked remarkably like Yates had at that age, and he was starting to show interest in a girl from town, the daughter of the general store owner. "Her name is Lily," William told his parents shyly. "I was thinking maybe I could invite her out to the ranch sometime, so you could meet her." Clara and Yates exchanged amused glances. Their eldest son was courting. It was both sweet and a stark reminder that time was passing, that their children were growing up and starting to build their own lives. Lily proved to be a lovely girl, practical and cheerful, who was not put off by the hard work of ranch life. She and Rose became friends through letters, and by the time Rose came home for the summer of 1894, William and Lily were engaged to be married. "I am too young to be a grandmother," Clara complained, though she was clearly delighted by the engagement. "You are 37, Yates pointed out. "That is a perfectly reasonable age to become a grandmother. Still feels too young." Where did the time go? Thomas, now 11, was fascinated by the idea of William getting married. "Will they live here on the ranch? Will you build them their own house?" "We have been discussing that," Yates said. "We think we will add on to the main house, create a separate wing for William and Lily. That way they have their own space but are still close enough to be part of the family operation." William and Lily were married in the spring of 1895, in a ceremony in Hecla that seemed like the whole county attended. Clara cried through the entire ceremony, watching her firstborn son become a husband, and Yates held her hand tightly, feeling his own eyes burn with tears he tried to hide. At the reception afterward, Marcus Thornton approached Yates with a glass of whiskey in each hand, offering one to Yates. "To the next generation," Marcus said, raising his glass, "may they have as much happiness as we have found." "I will drink to that," Yates agreed. Marcus looked around at the crowded hall, the happy faces, the celebration. "You have built something good here, Yates, something lasting. Your parents would be proud." "I hope so. Though most of the credit goes to Clara, she is the one who brought life back to everything. You both did it together. That is how the best things get built, through partnership and love. Marcus paused, then added, I am glad that woman from Ohio answered your advertisement all those years ago. Best hiring decision you ever made. Yates grinned. The best decision I ever made was deciding I wanted her for more than just garden work. William and Lily settled into their new wing of the house, and life on the ranch adjusted to accommodate another adult. Lily proved to be hardworking and adaptable, helping with the household tasks and learning about ranching from William. She and Clara became close, and Clara found herself enjoying having another woman around to talk with and work alongside. Rose came home from college for the summer changed and glowing with new knowledge and ideas. She immediately went to the garden and started implementing things she had learned, improving their growing methods and experimenting with new varieties. She also started working on a detailed catalog of all the medicinal plants in the region, planning to eventually publish it as a reference guide. I want to do something useful with all this education, she explained to her parents. Something that will help people here in Montana, not just advance my own career. Thomas, at 12, had become indispensable to the ranch's business operations. He kept meticulous records, tracked expenses and income, and had started suggesting ways to improve their efficiency and profitability. Yates relied on him more and more for the financial side of things, grateful to have someone who understood and enjoyed the work. In the fall of 1896, Lily announced she was pregnant. Clara was indeed going to become a grandmother, and she was both thrilled and slightly panicked by the prospect. What if I do not know how to be a grandmother? She worried to Yates. What if I am terrible at it? You will be wonderful at it, just like you are wonderful at everything else, Yates assured her. And besides, Lily will have you right here to help her, which is more than many young mothers have. The baby, a boy they named James, was born in early spring of 1897. Yates held his first grandchild with trembling hands, looking down at the tiny face and feeling the circle of life complete itself in a profound way. This is what it was all for, he said quietly to Clara as they stood together looking at William and Lily with their new son. All the hard work, all the struggles. It was to create this, to give our children the foundation to build their own families and futures. Clara leaned against him, watching their grandchild sleep peacefully. Your mother would have loved this moment, seeing her family continue and thrive. She would have, but I like to think she knows somehow, that both our mothers know and are happy for us. Rose returned to college for her final year, graduated with honors, and shocked everyone by announcing she was staying in Boston to attend medical school. It was an unusual choice for a woman, and the fight to be accepted had been difficult, but Rose was determined. I want to be a real doctor, she told her family during her visit home after graduation. I want to combine what I know about plants and healing with formal medical training. There are so few doctors out here, especially who understand both modern medicine and traditional remedies. I can fill that gap. Clara supported her completely. You follow your dreams, Rose. We will be here waiting when you come home. Thomas, now 14, announced that he wanted to spend some time working at the bank in Hecla, learning about finance and investment. Yates arranged for him to work there during the winter months when ranch work was slower, and Thomas proved to have a real talent for understanding money and markets. The years kept passing, each one bringing new changes and new joys. William and Lily had 3 more children over the next several years, daughters named Emma, Grace, and Helen. The ranch house expanded again to accommodate the growing family, and the sound of children playing and laughing became a constant backdrop to daily life. Thomas, at 18, decided he did not want to be a full-time rancher. Instead, he wanted to split his time between the ranch and the bank in town, where he had become invaluable to the owner. It was not what Yates had envisioned, but he supported his son's choice. "You should do what makes you happy," Yates told him. "The ranch will be fine with William running it. You go make your mark in the world of finance." Rose finished medical school in 1901 and returned to Montana a fully trained physician. She set up a practice in Hecla, becoming the first female doctor in the county and one of only a handful in the entire state. She lived in town but came out to the ranch regularly, treating family and neighbors and continuing her research into medicinal plants. In 1903, Yates and Clara celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. The celebration was huge, with family and friends coming from all over the county to honor them. William gave a speech about his parents and the life they had built, and there was not a dry eye in the hall. 25 years ago, my father hired a woman to tend a dying garden, William said. But what actually happened was that woman planted roots deep in his heart and grew a family and a legacy that will continue for generations. To my parents, the strongest, most loving people I know. That night back at the ranch, Yates and Clara walked through the garden together in the moonlight. It had been expanded and improved over the years, but the basic layout was still his mother's, still the garden that had brought them together. "You remember that first day?" Clara asked. "When you brought me out here and I saw this mess and thought I could fix it. I remember thinking you were crazy to think anything could grow here again, but you proved me wrong. We proved each other wrong about a lot of things. I thought I would never trust another man, never risk loving again. You thought you were meant to be alone forever. We were both wrong, thank God." Yates stopped walking and pulled her close. At 52 and 50 they were no longer young, but their love had only deepened with time. "I love you, Clara. 25 years and 3 children and 4 grandchildren later, I love you more than ever." "I love you too. Always have, always will." They stood together in the garden, surrounded by plants and memories and the life they had cultivated with such care. Above them, the Montana sky was full of stars, the same stars that had looked down on them that first night they declared their love. Everything had changed, and nothing essential had changed. They were still partners, still best friends, still deeply in love. In the following years, the family continued to grow and evolve. William and Lily's children grew up helping on the ranch, learning the same lessons William had learned from Yates. Thomas married a woman named Rebecca whom he met through the bank, and they built a house in Hecla, though Thomas still spent significant time at the ranch helping with the business side of operations. Rose established herself as an exceptional doctor, gaining respect even from those who initially doubted her abilities because she was a woman. She published her catalog of medicinal plants, which became a standard reference work throughout the region. She never married, choosing instead to dedicate herself to her work and her family. As Yates and Clara moved into their 60s, they gradually stepped back from the daily operations of the ranch, letting William take over more completely. But they remained active and engaged, Clara still tending her beloved garden, Yates still offering advice and helping where he could. In 1910, they celebrated their 32nd anniversary quietly, just the two of them. They sat on the porch as they had done thousands of times over the decades, watching the sun set over the mountains, holding hands. "You ever wonder what your life would have been like if I had never come here?" Clara asked. "Not anymore. For a while I did, but now I cannot even imagine it. You are too much a part of who I am. Asking me to imagine life without you is like asking me to imagine life without breathing," Clara smiled. "That is exactly how I feel. You are woven into every part of my life, every memory, every hope for the future. We really did become one, did we not? Like the Bible talks about. We did. And I am grateful for every single day we have had together. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had built a life from nothing but love and hard work and stubborn determination. The garden stretched out before them, full and lush, a living testament to everything they had created together. Their children were settled and happy, their grandchildren were growing strong, and the ranch was prosperous and secure. We did good, did we not? Clara said softly. We did very good, Yates agreed. Your grandmother would be proud, my mother would be proud, I am proud. I am proud, too, of us, of our children, of everything we built here. When I die, I will die satisfied, knowing I lived a good life. Do not talk about dying. We have many more years together yet, Clara laughed. I hope so. But when the time comes, whenever that is, I will not have any regrets, except maybe wishing I had found you sooner, so we could have had even more time together. Yates brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. However much time we get, it will never feel like enough, but I will treasure every moment of it. They lived many more years together, watching their grandchildren grow up and have children of their own, watching the ranch continue to thrive and the garden continue to produce. They grew old together, their bodies slowing but their minds sharp and their love constant. Yates died first in 1916 at the age of 65. It was peaceful, a heart attack in his sleep, and Clara found him in the morning lying beside her looking peaceful and younger somehow without the cares of life weighing on him. She grieved deeply, but also felt grateful that they had been given so many years together, grateful that he had not suffered, grateful that their last words to each other the night before had been, "I love you." The funeral was attended by what seemed like the entire county, people coming to pay respects to a man who had built something lasting and good. Clara lived another 8 years, dying in 1924 at the age of 72. She had remained active almost to the end, still tending her garden, still helping Rose with healing work, still offering wisdom to her children and grandchildren. When her time came, she was surrounded by family and her last words were, "I am going to see Yates now. Do not be sad. I have had such a good life." They buried her next to Yates in the family cemetery on the ranch, with a headstone that read simply, "Clara Meadows Ashford, beloved wife, mother, and healer. She made things grow." The ranch and the garden continued under William's care, and then his children's care, and then their children's care. The story of how it all began, how a lonely rancher hired a woman to tend his dying garden, and she ended up planting roots deep in his heart, became family legend, passed down through generations. The house still stands, expanded and modified but fundamentally the same. The garden still produces, still follows the basic layout that Clara established all those years ago. And on summer evenings, if you stand on the porch and look out at the mountains and the endless Montana sky, you can almost feel their presence still there. Two people who loved each other and built something beautiful that outlasted them both. Their love story was not dramatic or flashy. There were no grand gestures or sweeping declarations beyond that first confession behind the Hecla Community Hall. Instead, it was built from thousands of small moments, daily choices to choose each other, to work together, to build something lasting. It was a love story written in the soil of a garden, in the laughter of children and grandchildren, in the steady, faithful partnership of two people who had both been hurt and lonely, but had found the courage to try again. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy they left behind. Not just the prosperous ranch or the legendary garden or even their many descendants, but the example of what real love looks like. Patient, enduring, rooted deep, and always growing toward the light.